Last time we looked at the pinnacle of Twisted Metal characters in each entry, ones who make every playthrough disgusting. You'll never die, it turns the game into easy mode, being the most brain-dead run-through of the series anyone could ever ask for. Now, we are looking at the opposite side of the spectrum, the bottom of the barrel. Characters who are not worth a minute of your time, are not fun to play as or do anything with. Ones you should avoid at all costs. In some cases it will be tougher to find the worst pick in each game, but surely it will still be fun. Regular roster characters only, no bosses allowed, so let us start with the worst character in the very first title. Twisted Metal 1 is an oddly balanced game. Ramming equals God in this title. Lots of people instantly stick Darkseid at the bottom because of how terrible his special weapon is. Obviously, just looking at that, yes, he is the worst in that front. Crappy handling, slower speeds that also make him less fun to play. But the fact ramming is so overpowered, it's really hard to just default him at the bottom. Most character specials in this game suck anyways. You have what, Mr. Grimm and Sweet Tooth that actually have really high impact specials. Other than that, it's mostly regular weapons and ramming that are your best friends here. If ramming was not as prevalent in the first game, Darkseid is the obvious choice. Upon further investigation, I felt either Crimson Fury or Pit Viper are the worst characters in this game. Having very little armor and no ability to ram anyone instantly makes them weaker on the list. Both of their specials are quite weak, especially Crimson Fury. That little laser thing, or whatever it's supposed to be, is the equivalent of sneezing on your opponent. Crimson's main strength is the speed and maneuverability over Pit Viper, or over anyone else for that matter, being the fastest car in this game, allowing you to get away from being rammed, which does help a lot. But that's his only strength. When I look at Pit Viper, I'm not really seeing any other things that make me want to choose this character in comparison to Crimson Fury. Sure, if I stack the specials, you can do quite a bit of damage, but you need to expend all of them. The handling and speed is subpar for this character as well. You can get rammed and die quite easily from having less than impressive armor, while not having the ability to get away as easy in comparison to my other worst choice of Crimson Fury. If I were to pick one character, Pit Viper would probably be the worst character of Twisted Metal 1, since this is such a scrappy game, having a lot of armor and being able to ram is very, very important. Any character who loses on this ability is just not going to be that good. Aside from a few like Mr. Grimm, where losing that armor is actually worth it since his special is so strong. Funnily enough, the PC version is a different story since the balancing there is a whole new can of worms. Crimson Fury is actually one of, if not the best character in the entire game. Other characters like Darkseid are much better due to his special freezing. From the limited testing that I've done, no other major changes were apparent compared to the PlayStation 1 version. Still an interesting look. Pit Viper seemed to be the same in both versions of the game, only good when you're spamming a special attack, stacking 5 of them at a time. Pit Viper just lacks any strengths in comparison to everyone else, Twisted Metal 1 being the only game to have 2 versions with different balancing. Taking Crimson Fury into account, he's broken on the PC version, but bad in the PlayStation release. I just felt Pit Viper being consistently bad on both versions puts her at the bottom of the Twisted Metal 1's tier list of characters. It's just the no fun zone. Twisted Metal 2 is a game where I think most people can agree who the bottom 3 characters are. Grasshopper, Hammerhead, and Twister. It varies for most people. Hammerhead is just a worse Axel who controls like complete shit, a special weapon that can be wasted on destroyed vehicles while also being quite glitchy. Grasshopper, who has a special that sometimes does more damage to you than it does to your enemies, plus putting you in a terrible position, making you get killed outright on occasion. Then you have Twister, who spins around, again a lot of the time dealing more damage to you than your opponents. Needless to say, all of these characters are noticeably worse than everyone else, and they're in their own tier of garbage. The question becomes, who is the worst of these 3? I rule Hammerhead out immediately because you actually have some armor in comparison to the other ones here. Sure, the special damage and control is absolutely horrendous. At least you can take some damage and be okay to try and fight to some degree or be able to get away. I hold defensive capabilities much higher in Twisted Metal 2 since the time to kill is so fast, and we all know how this game can be, so the more abuse you can take, the better. So that leaves us with Grasshopper and Twister, and I'm really torn here. Seriously, I think both of them are hot garbage that sat in the sun for 15 hours. Not even the homeless wanted it for their daily warm dinner at the McDonald's dumpster. That's what these characters remind me of, eating a disgusting meal such as that. All the fun gets sucked out and you're sitting there why you're even wasting your time dealing with any of this nonsense. Of course, there are people who would touch themselves in the bathroom to these characters, saying they're not bad, but if you compare them to literally anyone else in the game, they're garbage, aside from Hammerhead. The player is required to shield just to make the special weapon viable, which is already a downside. You're not doing heaps of damage upon activation, so the risk reward is not even remotely worth it. Both of them have really weak armor. I believe Twister has the weakest armor in Twisted Metal 2 aside from Mr. Grimm. While Grasshopper is very similar to Pit Viper from the previous entry. Funnily enough, the damage is actually decent with Twister, even though you can get yourself killed so easily with a special. Even when cars are dead, the amount of collision damage you take is unreal. Grasshopper will typically receive less damage, but deal less in comparison. Being torn on both of these, it was really tough. Honestly though, I still think Twister is the worst character upon further inspection due to one simple factor. I don't care what anyone says, the physics in Twisted Metal 2 are disgusting. They suck so bad and aged like milk. Jesus H. Christ on a rubber crutch. This ice skating rink ass driving is one of the reasons I cannot stand playing this game. People always use the drone answer of like, get good at the game, get good at the game. But the funny part is the exact same sentiment can be used towards Twisted Metal 3 with the flipping over. You actually can mitigate that with enough playtime. Twister exacerbates this atrocious physics in Twisted Metal 2 due to the speed. Jesus, take the goddamn wheel is what I say to this character. It genuinely feels virtually unplayable, similar to Sweet Tooth from Twisted Metal 3. The only character where mitigating flipping over is nearly impossible in that game. Twister is the Twisted Metal 3 Sweet Tooth. It's fun to drive fast like Sonic the Hedgehog coming for your asshole. At the same time, it's really irritating trying to control it, making it not so fun anymore. With Grasshopper, she controls quite well. Everything is about average in the handling and speed, so you're not going unnecessarily fast. To be serious for a second, when does Twister's speed actually come into use? Does it offset the worth of having a special that does heaps of damage to yourself? No, the levels aren't large enough either for the speed to actually be warranted. Grasshopper smells like a dirty diaper, but Twister is even worse. No thank you.
Hello, mortal. This is your pal Dollar Store Grim here. I need to make sure you subscribe to this channel and leave a like on the video. Make sure to click the bell icon too. If you don't follow my instructions, then there is no escaping my wrath. Let the world beware.
Finding the best character in Twisted Metal 3 was a battle between three choices, and it's the same thing with the worst: Mr. Grimm, Hammerhead, and Sweet Tooth. The only time Sweet Tooth would ever be considered the worst in any title. With the core gameplay changing overall, time to kill being slowed down, some characters were really hindered. Mr. Grimm was a big one. His special is rancid, like seriously, it does about the same damage as a power missile does, while also having the lowest armor on the roster. Typically, Mr. Grimm would always have a very strong special to offset this. Sadly here, he does not. It makes picking him very frustrating in comparison to everyone else. You're always taking it up the ass, always needing to get health, but you don't have anything to offset that. Hammerhead is someone who really got shafted in a lot of Twisted Metal titles actually. Funnily enough, how a monster truck in a car combat game is almost always bad. Our main issue here with Hammerhead is the fact your special just doesn't work sometimes, or does so little damage you can't even notice it. I'm not sure why this is, but it happens often, which is really annoying. In a game like Twisted Metal, a special that is not fun or impactful to use really takes away from the enjoyment a player can have. Finally, we have Sweet Tooth, who is in consideration because of one simple aspect. I mentioned it with Twister, but the fact Twisted Metal 3 becomes virtually unplayable while using this piece of shit. His cardboard box-ass automobile suffers from flipping over constantly. As I said, it's possible to control that with anyone else. Seriously, mitigating flipping over is a real possibility. Aside from Mr. Tooth, I'm not sure if it's the way he's designed, the shape, but it's not fun, and there's no shield in Twisted Metal 3, so when you do flip over, you cannot stop taking damage. It makes it become really annoying. His special also sucks. It may look like a large explosion, but you need to be quite accurate to get damage worth a damn. Out of these three picks, it's really hard to choose since they all suck in their own regards. It's a really tough battle, and I think ruling Mr. Grimm out is an obvious choice because even though he sucks, he has the best character design in the entire franchise, plus theoretically he is fully controllable. Hammerhead and Sweet Tooth are the ones who are not. Sweet Tooth, regardless of what you're doing, he flips over, and Hammerhead, every time you activate the special weapon, your chances of flipping over is increased by a large margin. But the thing breaking the camel's back is Hammerhead's special doing nothing. At least with Sweet Tooth, he's flipping over like a fish out of water, but you can actually deal damage with your special consistently, even though it's not very much. When it comes to Hammerhead, you are punished for even using your special weapon. Sometimes it does no damage, other times it will flip you over when you activate this shit, going in the complete opposite direction of what a special is supposed to do. This really needed a damage increase or something to actually make it worth anything. Hammerhead's special from Twisted Metal 3 is genuinely one of the worst specials in the franchise, and it's just, I cannot fathom how terrible it is. Sweet Tooth, you're allowed to have fun for a couple of seconds at a time. Hammerhead, you are not allowed to have fun anytime your special is activated. Truly being a toss-up, but Hammerhead beats it out as the worst character from this entry to me. Twisted Metal 4 is a very easy pick for who is the worst. Out of the starting roster, the Joneses family and Captain Grimm are the instant choices. Having very little impact damage in their special weapon immediately brings them towards the bottom. Microblast is a meme to some people, but honestly, he is an overhated character. Going back and forth between Captain Grimm and the Joneses family, testing out different aspects between the two, I started to notice something. Captain Grimm is a dirt-ass piece of trash. Like, holy guacamole, this guy sucks. The special is terrible, doing barely any damage. You also have really low armor, so what is the point of this character? Seriously. Being 4's version of Mr. Graham-Cracker, who again is supposed to be the glass cannon type of character with a really strong special and weaker armor, instead he is weak on both fronts, being one of the few cars in the whole series who actually has no positives. At least in Twisted Metal 3, there were two characters to hide how truly bad Mr. Grimm is. Here, there is nothing. At least with Microblast, he is the most maneuverable character in 4. That's his strength. Sure, the special is terrible, but at least he has something. The small size makes it hard for you to get hit. Captain Grimm actually has nothing to be happy about. I had the Joneses family in the conversation because of how weak the special is, but at least the family can take some abuse before they die. It becomes more apparent how terrible Captain Grimm is the more you test this character out. By far, being the worst character in 4, and honestly one of the worst in the entire series, no question. Twisted Metal 5, Puckered Urethra the video game. I've always felt like Black is a balanced title overall. Everyone has their clear strengths and weaknesses. Our eyes immediately fall towards Darkseid and Brimstone as the worst characters in Twisted Metal 5. As a part of me, I wanted to stick Yellowjacket in here as well because I cannot stand that car in this game. Ramming enemies and doing damage is fun, just actually hitting them is the hard part. Plus, shooting the special is completely worthless. Some people may view Yellowjacket in consideration, but the ramming damage is actually quite good, so I can't in good faith talk about Yellow J here. When it comes to Darkseid, that special always seems to be very inconsistent and similar to Twisted Metal 3 Hammerhead, just not that awful. I never feel like you know how much damage you're going to deal. Sometimes it seems one amount, then another time you use it, it will be less, then it will be more again, confusing the hell out of me. Plus, the battle against Snorhawk is a slog, considering hitting that flying machine is more difficult than most characters. The rooftop level, using your special is always a risk, occasionally flying right off the edge. It happens to the AI at sometimes as well. Brimstone is a weird one. His special is just bad. There's no other way to put it. The tracking is very strange. Sometimes it will land as it should, and other times it goes right over your opponent. When your little man lands on the target, its damage is pathetically low in comparison to so many other characters. I see Brimstone as a terrible Spectre, essentially. The battle between these two characters is not the most difficult thing in the world if you take into account, at least with Darkseid, the armor you were given is good. Sometimes the special is damaging while being inconsistent, unfortunately. Driving off the map on the rooftops is only a one-level issue, plus if you make sure not to use it in a risky area, you'll be fine. Boarhawk is an issue with both of them. Funnily enough, it seems to be much harder to hit Snorhawk with Brimstone. If you aren't angled correctly, it becomes a really filthy moment in history. With Brimstone, you'll probably struggle the most in comparison to anyone else. When I played through the game with everyone on stream recently, it was not fun. I hated every moment of it. The chances of me actually touching this character again is slim to none. Commonly amongst this list, typically the very worst character is interchangeable with someone else. I could see some arguments for Darkseid to be here instead of Brimstone, but for me, I don't see how it would be feasible for anyone to say any character in this game is worse than Brimstone. I'm curious to hear anyone else's arguments to say Darkseid is worse. Small Brawl has a very weird balancing, as we mentioned in the video of the best characters. Darkseid is blatantly overpowered. Just like the lower end of the spectrum, there are two characters that are complete jokes, Warthog and Axel. Trapper is also very, very close to being included on this list because my lord, he is so bad. I just feel these two are slightly worse, putting them in their own tier. The only time either of them are this low on a tier list, because typically Axel and Warthog are always good characters. Starting with Warthog, originally he was supposed to be Grasshopper. Even looking at the character model, it's quite obvious to tell they took a little buggy and put the most generic camouflage on it. The special weapon is atrocious, only being viable if you activate it at a specific range. Medium to long range is the sweet spot. Otherwise, it will go completely around or over the target. That's always fun. Having a special doing barely anything is always my favorite aspect of a character, reminding me of Twisted Metal 3 Hammerhead all over again, which are memories that I do not want to have. The impact damage is very weak in comparison to a lot of other characters as well, on top of having very little armor. I believe it's actually less than Mr. Grimm. I wouldn't be shocked, no one is blamed for being disgusted at this piece of trash. With Axel, it's much of the same. His handling is the best on the entire roster though, and it's not much of a strength because most cars in Small Brawl control quite well. It's most likely this game's largest strength in the gameplay front. His special is an unnecessary change to me, removing his shockwave and replacing it with this weird missile thing. You need to hit someone with a normal straight shooting missile, and if that missile connects, Axel has a seizure and shoots out a bunch of little missiles. The best part is that it barely does any damage, considering you need to hit a skill shot to even get damage off. It slightly tracks, just not enough for a reliable connection. Both of them control well, again, not being much of a specialty considering it's common amongst the entire roster. They both have shit armor, dying if someone sneezes in their direction, leaving us with the Breaker, the special weapons. It really depends on how you look at the situation. Making my decision, it came down to Axel. Warthog is a joke, there's no beating around the bush. At least you can get a reliable special damage at a range. It's not going to culminate to this giant chunk of fuck, but it's still going to be something in comparison to Axel. If you miss this terrible tracking missile, you're just screwed with damage unless you drive right next to someone while he's spinning around and then maybe you'll get a little bit off. In reality, you're just going to be waiting for Axel to stop spinning around before you can do anything else, watching the missiles fly in different directions with no impact to anything aside from your sanity. I hate both of these characters. Axel just edges out to me as the worst character in Small Brawl. Twisted Metal Head On actually has an entry this time, shocking myself, honestly. Looking at the best characters, it was hard to come up with anything since everyone feels the same, aside from one character who we all know, ATV. A part of me wanted to consider Cousin Eddie because he is a boss character that's a pathetic joke. No one really has expectations for ATV, but when it comes to playing as a boss, you're expecting the character to be powerful since, it's a boss. Cousin Eddie is a piece of filth, but it cannot be underestimated how disgustingly atrocious ATV is. You have the weakest armor in the entire series, I would say. About 2 power missiles kills you with no upgrades. Even with upgrades, you receive so much damage from the littlest attacks. If you want to talk about the non-upgraded special, Jesus Christmas, that little shotgun ass attack you need to stick the barrels up the bum of a smaller car, just to get some damage off. Thankfully, people like Mr. Slam or Darksooth take decent damage from a range, but you still need to be really close to get maximum damage. I never understood that design choice. You want me to be right next to someone when I can take a fire missile and lose a quarter of my health. This isn't like Mr. Grimm where you can drive by, shoot it out, and leave. You need to make sure the time is taken for the damage to be dealt since there's a delay. When the special is upgraded, it's much better. You throw this heat-seeking dynamite, which is a great way to do the aforementioned drive-by attack pattern, since it will just cut through space and time to hurt your target. The initial special is where the problems arise, making the first few levels the only time Head-On Extra Twisted Edition is actually tough. Interestingly enough, this character does suck, but also the only one on this list that's slightly enjoyable. Everyone knows how brain-dead Extra Twisted Edition is, so having a character who you actually need to be careful with since you barely have any health, it creates a very tense playthrough, making it more engaging for a lot of people. Granted, this does not take away from the fact that ATV sucks, just makes the game slightly more enjoyable to ones who want a challenge. So if you really think about it, we should be thanking Head-On for including this redneck ass in the game. So thank you Head-On Extra Twisted Edition for doing one thing right.
Twisted Metal 2012. I was really hoping I would never need to think of this piece of shit again. These idiot-ass developers took me out of the wheels. Does that look like me? This little clown-ass punk bitch in my spot. That should be me there. Way to ruin the charm of the game. How is this okay? Who would want to take me, Axel, who was on the cover of one of the goddamn games, out of the roster?
And with that, it's the worst character in every Twisted Metal game. I'm curious to hear what everyone else's lists are. There are a lot of stinky characters throughout the franchise, and it's always fun to hear who and why certain characters are terrible. Their perspectives and differing opinions always makes things interesting.
Wow! Do you want to be a cool person like everyone here? Join the Bonzi Lucky Club today! Thank you to everyone who supports the channel. You are a hero to us all.
Ginaratolini, 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 Ginaratolini.